Hello out there. First, I'd like to welcome my two new subscribers whose names didn't show up. I welcome and thank you. Well, today, guess I got to tell you a little bit more about myself. Well, some of where I grew up. If I don't bore you to death. Uh, I, my mom and dad are from here, and I was born here. I was born in Newport. My mom and dad, of course, were born and raised here. My dad joined the Navy, and he spent had a career in the Navy. I think so far, the one other person in YTPC who has a parent that made a career out of the military is, I think, Ethan Parsimonious Piper. And we, most of the the constant moving we done when I was a baby and still quite small. First to San Diego, then to Seattle, Washington. And that's where my dad done the first of his 3 tours in Vietnam. He was on the USS Krishna. When we were there, they had done a lot of repair on the gunboats. And that's where my dad actually got in on some of the fighting. They're always looking for volunteers on the gunboats. That's what he told me. So he volunteered. He said he was bored. Never done it again. After that tour, and from there, my dad had to go back on the second tour. My mom and I were already in here for Arkansas, I think for about a year. This is where my brother Robin was born. My dad only got to see my brother Robin for a few days before he had to go back. And when he came back from his tour, he got shore duty. We moved to Meridian, Mississippi, right there on the Alabama state line, just about, at the Naval Air Station there. Lived there for like a couple of years, till about 71. And I was 6 years old. School was already out. We stayed for a short time in Florida. Then we moved to Charleston first, to James Island, then to Menrev, which is pretty close to Goose Creek. Menrev can be considered either Charleston or Goose Creek, one way or the other. I also spent most of my high school there at Goose Creek High, which is only a few miles up the road from my house. We lived in Menrev twice. First, an old part of Menrev, which covers a pretty good chunk of New Menrev. They were the same type of houses. Those old ranch-style duplexes. And the other part of New Menrev was some of them were apartments or townhouse duplexes, but most of them were multiplexes. And that's where we lived later on, at 46 Tringa Street. And I looked it up. Yeah, they tore those houses down and made them all duplexes, townhouse duplexes. Surprised the hell out of me. But you can, if you're familiar enough, the layouts of the streets, you know it's the same place. Now on one side of the naval housing, you had the Polaris Missile Facility where they stored nukes. My dad had to do 1 year shore duty there. And well, the main road going by all of them was Red Bank Road. You go the other way like 5 miles, you're at the Naval Weapons Station where they load the nukes on, re-outfit them with torpedoes and whatever other munitions they needed on the subs. And in main naval bases in Charleston itself, right near the city section of town. Oh, well, we lived there for quite a few years. Then we lived for almost 3 years down there in a little town called Sheldon, outside of Beaufort, when my dad was stationed at the Beaufort Air Station. Beaufort's still relatively small. It hadn't grown much. I took my wife on vacation there about 6 years ago. We didn't live in the town of Sheldon itself. We lived out there in the middle of nowhere. From the dirt road to the main road was almost like 2 miles. And our nearest neighbor, well, physically, if you wanted to swim it, because the Port Royal Sound ran on the edge of our backyard. So yeah, we had salt water there. Was a place called Bray's Island. Big old plantation home. You couldn't see the plantation home itself. You just seen it like a little chunk white. Even when it was fall, the branches were still in the way. Every once in a while, we'd have snakes come through the backyard, because seems like most reptiles don't like getting in the salt water if they don't have to. Snakes might swim in every once in a while. So will gators. Gators will go out there and eat. But no more than usually no more than they have to. My dad caught one. It was like a little over a yard long. My mom about one ape. And we have a pond like a quarter mile going in one direction. Nice fishing, plenty of gators there. And going up the dirt road to the main road, our only neighborhood that was feasible to get to without a boat was the Greens. And I went to elementary school with their 3 kids. They had 1 son and 2 daughters. I remember Chico, Ethel, and I can't remember the baby sister's name. And yes, we spent a lot of time at the beach. When we lived in Menriv, sometimes we'd go swimming at the pool. It was just my mom and my brothers, or sometimes just me and some friends. Or when my dad wanted to take us all camping up there to Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie. If it wasn't there, it's the beach. Excuse me. Now, when we lived in Charleston, it was usually on the Isle of Palms, which is one of my favorites still, Folly Beach, and Edisto. We went to Myrtle Beach once. I don't know if my mom and dad just got curious. We went there once. It's a nice beach. I don't really care for it. It had a lot of condos that looked like it stretched from way out there as far as the eye could see. They weren't ugly, but they were still eyesores to me. And when we lived in Beaufort, it was usually Hilton Head or Edisto. And as far as I know, there might be another way getting on Edisto Island. Excuse me, I'm talking more than usual. When you go across the bridge, I don't know if it's even still there. Well, at first it was a seafood market there when I was growing up. It was Geechee Boys. And when I took my wife on vacation, that was her favorite place to go to the beach. She loved Edisto Beach. Geechee Boys had turned into a donut shop. Oh, like the Carolinas need another donut shop. Well, while we lived in Buford, yeah, my dad done a lot of fishing, hunting. Sometimes took us. Usually it was with his friends. Go out shrimping, and we done some saltwater fishing. Usually for sea cat, sea bass, flounder, shark. I've eaten plenty of shark. Or you'd have them a few drinks at the bar. Otherwise, like anybody, like most people in the military, I'd say that applies to most civilians. Who are the people you make friends and hang out with? Your co-workers, or your fellow sailor, Marine, Army. You get the picture. So yeah, we spent a lot of time with families of other sailors and Marines. Now the Marine Air Station, you go down when you go down the road towards it, it was on the left-hand side, and almost right across from it was Laura Bay housing. Yeah, we spent a lot of time there. That was the military housing down in there, down that way. And we spent quite a few days with Mark and Kathy Isaiah. Sometimes they'd be just shooting at crap. Might be making plans, whatever they're doing. Or, they had to spend time playing games like aggravation, canasta, oh, especially pinochle, which could go on forever. Why, my three brothers and I, my youngest brother's name is Larry, by the way, we'd be there in the living room. And when there wasn't a good movie on TV, I'd be rummaging through Mark and Kathy's bookcase. I'd say most of it, more than likely Mark's books. A lot of what he had was a series called The Executioner. Some one man's felt like he had to be a one-man army, I guess, against organized crime. With titles like Caribbean Kill, Sicilian Slaughter, Detroit Death Squad, Boston Blitz, Atlanta Ass Ripping. You get the picture. And yes, I've seen some of the sights of Buford when I was a kid. One of them later after I was growing up. And I forgot, there is one other installation there, and that's Paris Island. That's where Marines do their basic training. Because the whole Buford Charleston's not much of an exception. There's a lot of islands. Now, one of the sites, one of them I seen as a kid, was the Chapel of Ease. It was burning in a forest fire. There's Fort Fremont. I didn't know it was a fort until later on. I just remember a black structure when I was a kid. It was built there during before the Spanish-American War. And if you go in front of that fort, down to the tiny beach they have, you look right across, you can see Paris Island. You ain't gonna see much from that way. But from St. Helena's, yeah, I love it. I wouldn't mind having a home there. Now to get back to, you want to get into Buford, you go over Ladies Island. Pass through there more than I ever really visited. Go the other way, you have Fripp Island, Pritchard's, Hunting Island, the only beach I never went swimming to. Because when my mom took us, it was too cold. She wanted to see the lighthouse. Yes, and I climbed the lighthouse there about 3 times. Last time, it wasn't that fun. Oh, God. I've seen yes, I've seen the sights of Charleston. One of them is when we lived in Buford in the fourth grade. Had a field trip to the Charleston Museum and to Fort Sumter. And the other times is mainly when we moved back. A couple of them with my mom. My grandma was with us once. Seen the Battery several times, along with a lot of the beautiful old homes. Fort Moultrie. My dad was not interested in those places. And a lot of them I'd seen was on my own. Well, in Buford, in Sheldon, the one thing you can see is a place called the Old Sheldon Church. The name of the church was the Prince William Parish. It was burned down twice. First time by the British Army because they suspected arms were being stored there. And the other time it might have been by accident because it's a church out in the middle of nowhere. It was burned down during the Civil War and never rebuilt on. And the other thing was the Otunji African Village. It's grown since I was a kid. I'm glad it's still there. Now, in the town of Sheldon, that's where you see anybody from the village go outside the village. It was usually the women, dressed in a traditional garb. I guess they'd take care of whatever business needed to be taken care of, like retrieving the mail, buying supplies, or whatever. And when we lived in Charleston, oh yeah, I've seen a few other things. I've been on the Yorktown countless times. That's because I was in the Sea Cadets. Yeah, I look real good in a set of Cracker Jacks. When we didn't have our meetings, our drills on the main naval base, on occasions we have it on the Yorktown. And we also worked on the Yorktown. We restored a few of the quarters, busting rust, scraping and painting. Some of that was promised to us and they give it to the Boy Scouts. I've been all over that carrier. Been on spots where most tourists are not allowed to go or dare to go. I shouldn't have done it, but I did. A lot of times you need at least a good light or a flashlight. See where you're going. I know before I ever moved away, they brought in the destroyer Lafayette submarine. I forgot the name of the sub. And I don't know if they really kept it there or not. It was the first, and as far as I know, the only nuclear-powered merchant ship, USS Savannah. Yeah, I went poking around on there. And those of you who might be wondering, yes, they do name beach homes. There were plenty of beach homes to be seen. And some of them, I think it's the whimsical of humans who want to name their houses like it's a seagoing vessel. Now you know the ones, Mermaid's Palace, Neptune's Nasty Dreams. I never paid it much mind. There's one I'd say it had a cool name. It's called Black Magic. That was there on the Isle of Palms. The way it would go in, that was the first thing you had was a couple of the beach homes before you had to make a right. You can see it, Black Magic, printed out. And on one of the support beams, they had painted Aladdin's lap and black silhouette. It was cool. I have to give it that. And from that house, you just make a right and make a left. Voila, you're there at the beach. Well, I came back to Charleston after my little stint in the military. And that's when I called my dad and said, "Why don't you give Arkansas? Would you like to give Arkansas a try?" He moved the family back home after he retired out of the Navy. I said, "Why not?" And I've been here ever since. I'm going to try to cut this video off here in a second before it gets too long. And those of you who made it this far, I thank you. Especially making this far and not fall asleep. And I'll be back again with another video. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more later. It is too much talking the detail over. Thank y'all. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thank y'all for dropping in.